IELTS paragraphing. In this tutorial, we are going to look at IELTS Writing Task 2 and the paragraphing use skills you will need in order to pass IELTS at a Band 7 or higher. I'll give you a brief summary of what we will cover. Well, what good paragraphing is. So, a good paragraph isn't too long and it's not too short. We usually limit it to one argument as well per paragraph. The paragraphs should be unified, i.e. they should all be on a single topic. And final point, paragraphs shouldn't really split the sentences. Okay, and the sentences are either logically connected or illustratively connected. Before we get into this, let's have a look at some tips that will help you write better paragraphs, and then we'll jump into some examples and some brief information about how you can write better. So, first tip, you want to make the first sentence of your paragraph the general point. This is often called your thesis sentence. Okay? Now, from there, what you want to do is build it up. Okay? Make the other sentences offer evidence, give examples, enforce your claim, your initial claim in your thesis sentence, and then if you're really skilled, you'll be grouping each stage of your argument into one paragraph and making and building a convincing claim. So I go into this in more detail in a tutorial about argumentative essay writing, which is a very useful skill to have for the IELTS writing task. Now, a criteria of excellent paragraphing skills is that, well, for Band 9, it says in the criteria, it says skillfully manages paragraphing. So the definition of paragraphing is the organization of a number of sentences into a block of sentences. Now, the paragraphs are set apart from each other by a small indentation, a small space at the beginning of each paragraph. So what I usually do is just imagine the word the. If you're writing this with a pen and paper, usually the word the is enough space. So we're talking about 3 letters, then another space, and then we start the paragraph. Right. So you'll see if you're watching the tutorial, if you're watching the video, that each of the paragraphs have a small indentation, the ones we are looking at. So what is skillful paragraphing? Skillful paragraphing means grouping words together so that they seem to belong naturally together. We don't want a paragraph break to come between 2 sentences, one of which follows from or illustrates the other. Conversely, we don't want sentences which seem to have nothing to do with each other to be included in the same paragraph. Let's illustrate this by looking at an example, a sample block of text, and seeing how we might best paragraph this block of text. If you're listening to the podcast of this, what we have now is a block of text. There's no indentation, there is no spacing, there's no logical grouping. It's just a lump of text. Now, those watching the video tutorial will be able to see we have this lump of text, and it's about the ozone. Have a quick read of it, and possibly you might be able to even break it up already into logical paragraphs. In practice, of course, you will divide your work into paragraphs as you are writing, rather than first writing a block of text as we've done just before. And then with your text, you will divide it into paragraphs. But the block of text shown before is a useful way of illustrating some do's and don'ts of paragraphing, which we're going to dive into right now. One approach, which I don't recommend, is to make every single sentence a paragraph, but that's very, very basic, and also it doesn't read very well. Now, if you're on the online course, we've got this basically mastered into a process which makes it much easier and straightforward. Because as you can see here, generally when you're writing, you will start paragraphing your work. That's one approach. In the online course, we recommend that you formulate your ideas first, and then you group your ideas into paragraphs. And this is quite a straightforward process, but if you're struggling with coming up with ideas and you're struggling with organizing your paragraphs, then the online course is really useful for you for this part of the IELTS essay writing process. Because in the online course, there's a set process to follow, and we build ideas, we build paragraphs around ideas, and also a lot of focus and attention is given to the right ideas, so we do not lose points on task response. Now then, so we've broken up our paragraph into sentence paragraphs, and I see this a lot when I'm correcting essays. It's not recommended. It's definitely not recommended for your IELTS writing essay. So it looks as though we're over pausing, it's over emphatic. Here we've got a better version. We've separated the sentences and we've grouped some of them together. The balance between the text and the paragraph breaks looks better, at least superficially. We've got a reasonably balanced ratio of text to breaks. Instead of having either too few or too many, it's balanced. It's separated into 3. And for those listening, generally we've gone for about 4 paragraphs, and 2 of those paragraphs have 2 sentences in each. The problem with this separation that we've got is the placement of these breaks. Now, the break should not come in the middle of a point which you are making. So let's go back and I'll illustrate this. So here, for example, a paragraph break is placed between the melting of the ice caps would cause sea levels around the world to rise, leading to floods. And then the next paragraph starts and it states, some low-lying countries would probably be completely inundated and become uninhabitable. The second sentence, though, is exploring the consequences of the first. You see here? So in the first sentence we talked about the melting of the ice caps. Then in the second paragraph, because this is a new paragraph, we've talked about some low-lying countries would probably be completely inundated. So the two sentences naturally belong together in the same paragraph. Let me just emphasize this again. The first sentence is stating what would happen, and then the second sentence is exploring the consequences. So these are logically linked, and that's how they should be. That's why they should be together in the paragraph. Also, hopefully, you'll have noticed for those watching the tutorial that we have a similar point in the second paragraph. Okay? There's a paragraph break between ozone protects the earth from the sun's rays. Okay, that's the last sentence of the second paragraph. Without an ozone layer, the earth would quickly heat up and its ice caps, for example, would melt. Now, the topic of ozone in this example is spread over 2 different paragraphs. And to make it even worse, the last sentence is talking about ozone, then the first sentence of the next paragraph is also talking about ozone. So this is a complete lack of cohesion and coherence with regards to paragraphing. Now, the effect is that the paragraph break impedes the reader, it stops the reader from following the flow of the argument, instead of assisting the reader to follow it. So, let's try again with another paragraph. We've got 2 sentences in the first paragraph and 3 sentences in the second paragraph. Now, this is better. Okay, and we've got the final paragraph as well. So we've divided it up into 3 paragraphs, and this is much better because it provides you with paragraphs of a good size. So that's between 2 to 3 sentences as a general rule. Do not take that as the set rule. The paragraphs are neither too large or too small. Also groups each stage of the argument in a separate paragraph. Now, this is fantastic. Let me just repeat this because it's very important. It also groups each stage of the argument in a separate paragraph. And once again, this is a very important skill to have. Restricting basically 1 argument per paragraph is a good guide to follow for your paragraphing. And this is exactly what we teach in the online course. We might have a few points in each argument, in each paragraph, but generally we're following 1 argument per paragraph. And this usually forms well-balanced, clear, cohesive essays, especially if they're following the C2 template, the sentence guide structure for paragraphing, for essay writing. Then it's much easier than you might imagine. So let's have a quick summary. So good paragraphing has a number of features. Number 1, the paragraphs are neither too long or too short. They should be longer than a single sentence though, but not longer than a page, obviously. Number 2, the paragraphs should be unified. All the material within a paragraph should concern a single topic. So, as I've said before, and this is also what I teach in the online course, if a new idea comes to you while you are writing, and you've already planned that paragraph, think twice about including it into your work, because it might not lend itself, it might not be suitable to the logical argument and the logical flow of points and arguments and evidence and examples that you've written in your IELTS essay. So be careful. If you can squeeze it in a logical way, and of course it corresponds to task achievement, then include it. But as a general rule, I encourage students to ignore these thoughts that just pop into their mind while they're writing their paragraphs. Third point, paragraph breaks should not split apart sentences which are logically or illustratively connected to each other. And that's a point that I just demonstrated a few minutes ago when we spread the idea of ozone layer between 2 paragraphs. That was fatally flawed and disastrous way to build your paragraphs. Now, one final tip in 2 parts. One excellent way of constructing good paragraphs is to do the following. Make the first sentence of your paragraph the statement of your general point that you're trying to make. This is what I mentioned at the beginning. We make it the thesis statement. Then make your other sentences in that paragraph set out the evidence and examples which support your general point. And as I've said before, we go into this in sufficient detail in the online course, but also, more importantly, we've got a very easy process to follow for this in the sentence guide. As I said before, we just drop your ideas into this formula and hey presto, you've got a very strong, coherent essay. The second part of the final tips: get each thesis sentence alone and separate it. This is obviously easier to do if you're writing on the computer, and you just copy paste your 3 or 4 your thesis statements, copy or paste those into one document and read them, and then you should get an accurate overview of what your essay is communicating or arguing. Of course, it doesn't work for all of them, but it's a good guideline, especially when you're preparing. You're not going to do this in the exam center, in the exam room, but you can do this while you're preparing. So that's everything from me. Thank you very much for listening or watching this tutorial. If you need more help, go to IELTSPodcast.com and you can sign up and get lots of IELTS materials. And also, don't be afraid of getting feedback for your work. That's a very fast way to improve. And if you need more tutorials and more guidance, have a look at the online course. It comes with full tutorials and expert essay feedback, so you can submit your essays and we have an expert here looking at them. You can get feedback. She'll give you tips for improvement, and it just makes the whole process easier and faster. And of course, you're improving much quicker and much more effectively. So that's it for me. Have a great day and good luck with your IELTS preparation.